Welcome to the Bonsai Time podcast, the tree hugger's number one spot for history, horticulture, and having fun. I'm your host, Ryan, and today I sat down with my co-hosts, Kevin and Kelly, to reflect on our past year in bonsai. What goals have we set in our bonsai lives, and where do we stand on meeting them? We also unpacked other milestones from our last year in bonsai, such as taking and leading new workshops, attending bonsai shows, and new trees and folks we've enjoyed meeting along the way. Okay, let's see. I guess we should say the intro thing.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Bonsai Time podcast, the tree hugger's number one spot for history, horticulture, and having fun. Today we have an interview with your hosts, Kevin, Kelly, and
Hey.
I. You can chime
Oh,
Hi.
in.
sorry.
That's okay. And we're just going to be, what will we be doing today? Kind of recapping our 2024 year in bonsai, year in podcasting, and looking ahead at 2025, especially in our personal life, bonsai life, how these things might intersect and what the podcast might look like for the next year
Or a couple.
or a couple. Well,
Yeah.
I don't think that far ahead yet. So,
Never mind. The ideas keep flying. So how was
so
everyone's 2024?
can't complain too much.
Yeah.
Um, my
It,
nursery in Vivo Bonsai, we had a lot of stuff going on.
Mm.
As like 2023 was the first year I sold anything at our Columbus show, and first year I led any workshops. And then 2024, I kind of blew up from there and I sold at our show again, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, and Louisville, Kentucky.
Mm.
So I made it out of the state a little bit for bonsai purposes. And I gave my first speaking to an outside club at Ann Arbor this year. So I'd say pretty successful year. And hopefully I've advanced my bonsai skills some. So can't be too unhappy when things are growing, you know?
Mm.
Hmm. What about you, Kelly? What were you going to say?
just it's been a little rough, but also good bonsai year.
I noticed, Kelly, you've been doing a lot of studying with certain people in California, yeah?
Yeah, well, I think we just had a lot of artists come through, and I think two of them were females. So Bob Pressler does a thing when they're here that if you're a female in bonsai, um, he'll just he, he's like comping the workshop
Oh,
so
awesome.
that he can help expose bonsai to more women.
Hmm.
So those were fun. And it is a different atmosphere when it's only women.
Mm.
Hmm. Hmm.
Didn't you style a tree at a show or not a show? A
Oh, yeah.
historical tree, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. It was a Ben Oki tree at the
Ooh.
Huntington Bonsai-a-thon. So I
Nice.
worked with that with Cheryl Manning.
That had to be a little nervous energy there, right?
It was until we figured out the tree wasn't actually for auction. I think Ted came running in and was like, that tree is not for auction. That's a
Huh.
historical tree that we're keeping. And I'm like, oh, okay. So we don't actually have to finish it, like help,
Mm. Mm.
from start to finish so that it could be auctioned
Hmm.
off for a good price. Although even if it wasn't finished, I think people were already circling, hoping it was going to be auctioned.
That's awesome.
So
Yeah, yeah.
is the Bonsai-a-thon like their annual auction at the Huntington? I've never been, or I've been to the Huntington, but not to that event.
It's every February. Uh, it's an event to raise money for the collection there. So we have what I think six to eight demonstrators, a big raffle, and auctions. So like if someone donates a tree to the Huntington, they keep it for a certain amount of time because they can't keep everything that gets donated, and they auction off some of the trees. And uh, there's like a lot of good old trees that get auctioned, some years more than others.
Not a bad problem to have. Nice.
Yeah.
So my accomplishments, let's see. I graduated. Yay, that's
Congrats.
Congratulations.
huge. I'm officially a horticulturist, I guess, whatever that means.
Fancy.
Um, it's a weird life not being at school anymore. As far as that was my full routine for the last 5 years or so, I guess. Um, I started an endowment fund to create the process to start the idea of creating a collection at the Ohio State University. Something similar, but not the same as the one in Michigan. I figured why not have a public collection on campus that can be utilized for education, community outreach, therapeutic relations with the therapeutic garden association we have on campus and all the other stuff. So yeah, that's going off. That's fun. Um, yeah, it's a lot of big stuff coming up that you'll have to stay tuned to know about, obviously. But um, yeah, those are the biggest ones for me. Bonsai wise, I did a lot of stuff. Studied with Hugo Zamora. That was fun. Learned a lot that way. Ryan, you and I got the volunteer rejuvenation project started at Dawes Arboretum. That was a
Hmm.
good one. Worked on those
In
historical trees.
Newark, Ohio,
Yep, yep.
for anybody nearby.
Still looking for volunteers for that. Ryan, you're gonna take over that this spring. Um, got a lot of styling in with those trees. I think I spent 20 hours on one tree just because, having a 2.5-year-old needing attention and also wanting to be a good family oriented person, can't divulge all my 10-hour plus days to just trees yet. So, you know, it's what it is.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
styled, what was it, two or three different trees for the Arboretum in the end, in addition to all the ones we repotted last spring.
3 or 4. Yeah. Three or
Yeah.
four of them. Yeah. Yeah. It was a good learning experience. I learned a lot from those in relation to understanding the essence of keeping, if not changing slightly, some of the original styling processes in relation to what the artist originally had wanted. Some of it was more due to needing to change things because of the health of the tree photosynthetically, and thus creating a different angle change or something in that way of the presentation of the tree. But otherwise, excuse me. Otherwise, it's relatively kept in the honest reception and interaction of the tree how it originally was supposedly seen. Because I've only ever seen it as it looked before I touched it, so I never saw it in the beginning. So
So, can you explain a little more, I guess, the backstory of why you got involved volunteering on the collection at Dawes Arboretum? Because, I mean, a lot of people
yeah,
have never
yeah,
heard of that arboretum, don't know
yeah,
what's going on with their trees there.
yeah. Hold on real quick. Sorry, I have to edit this out. I got a cough.
Mm.
Sorry about that. Edit that part up. Um, does yeah. So Ryan, was it 2 years ago, 3 years ago now? I think we had our first show at Dawes for in a long time with the club,
Hmm.
Columbus Bonsai Society. At the time, we had our point of contact. She came up to me and asked if we would be interested as a club to get involved in helping take care of the trees. And I said, I have no doubt about it. I know I wanted to. A little bit of selfish reasons, I guess, just to maintain my education to grow with better trees and more significance in provenance. Some things happened. The club was too busy to get involved, so I took it upon myself. I recruited you, Ryan, and then we went into that basically year and a half back and forth with Dawes of trying to get started. And then this 2024 was the technically first year we actually got started. So spring, repotted all the trees and things. But ultimately, too, I got started just because I wanted to help preserve the historical essence of these trees, but also create a bigger community outreach to know that these trees are there and help motivate people to get more involved. That's my essence. Why did you get on it, Ryan?
Well, just to explain a little more of the context. So, as far as we have heard, the Dawes Arboretum, which is what, half an hour or 45 minutes outside of Columbus,
Yep.
they used to have a full-time bonsai curator. So they've had
Yeah.
a full like public collection for multiple decades now. But after that curator retired, I guess, possibly passed, I'm not sure, then they were just having their horticultural staff maintain the trees. And once you've been doing bonsai a while, you know these are not perfectly overlapping skill sets. There's some special techniques that we use in bonsai, things that you would have to learn by doing actual bonsai, not just horticulture. And also the horticulturists that they are employing to take care of the bonsai, it's not their only responsibility. So then it can get pushed off to the end of the priorities. So they've managed to keep the trees alive and have been having them on display. But you could tell over time there was some, I guess an experienced eye could tell over time that there was some decline in the health. Maybe the aesthetic that used to be maintained has been kind of lost. The trees have become lanky, that kind of thing, right, Kevin?
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's kind of why we got involved and why I specifically got involved. I guess I was happy to help. You know, I had that experience working at the the revered trees of London Gardens, so I wasn't so hmm, hesitant to work on an old tree as I was when I first started at London Gardens, where it was like hands trembling and like, oh, I don't want to kill
Right.
it, you know. So I had, I think, enough confidence in myself that I figured I could help and not do any more harm to the trees.
Well,
Um,
it's like what Kelly was saying with the Benoki one. Once they found out it wasn't uh auctionable, right, Kelly? You're
mhm.
like, hey, it's smooth sailing now, right?
Yeah. No pressure.
I mean, Kelly, now since you've dealt with a lot more trees of possible significance and provenance being California with the history there, do you have a better, how would you say it? Do you have a better understanding of how you interact with those trees now, depending on who's working with you or if you're told to work on the tree a certain time?
Um, I think, well, just volunteering at the Huntington with Ted Matson,
Hmm.
because we get a lot of legacy trees or trees that people have been in people's collections for like 40, 50 years. So you do have a healthy respect, hopefully, for them,
Hmm.
um, and respect of what they were trying to do with the tree, how they designed it. But sometimes as the tree grows, like there was I don't know how old the black pine was, is probably the oldest one that the Huntington has now.
Hmm.
There was one main branch, like way out too thick. And Ted's like, watch this. So we all surrounded him and he sawed it off. And we're all
Wow.
like, I can't believe you're going to do that. I mean, that thing's probably taken years to grow and you're just going to cut it off like that. I mean, obviously he thought about it before he told us all to surround him and watch him do that. And after it was cut off, he's like, doesn't it look better? We're like, oh yeah, 100% better. So you just have to understand the tree will change. Um, and I guess if it's no longer under your care, your ownership, you're just gonna, I mean, I feel like that's just part of the evolution of bonsai. You have to be okay with the tree changing. And
Hmm.
I know
Mm,
I've seen or talked to people about the masters in Japan. They're not so like, even if it's an iconic tree that has like specific characteristic, if that characteristic is taking over the tree or going to hurt the design of the tree in the future, they're not attached to keeping it. Like they'll just get rid of it. So I
yeah.
feel like
There is an understanding of health of tree over personal preference, right?
yeah, because I was taught like, as a beginner last year before, like if that person, the original owner of the tree, made it that way, you need to keep it that way. But I don't know
Right.
if it's always possible. It doesn't seem like it's always possible to do that. Um, so I've heard that over and over, but usually that's from people from the past who knew who the owners were. And I
Hmm.
used to believe that too, because I'm like, that's what I was taught. Yeah, it should stay exactly the same. And now I'm just like, no, it can change. And if you're no longer the owner, there's a new owner and they see another tree in there, it's fine.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think that the threshold for making those decisions maybe becomes a little bit higher if it's a 100-year-old tree, from a very famous former owner, or if it's in a public collection and you're not the curator, so you don't have like the authority to make those decisions quite so much.
Hmm.
Whereas if it's your own tree, maybe not quite as old, then you don't have to be as attached to the decisions of the previous owner for sure. Um,
Hmm.
but in those higher scenarios, and maybe it takes a little more debating to make sure you're certain of your decision. Yeah.
Yeah.
A hard one to grasp because I know even professionals deal with that too. It's like, do you enact your own wants and desires, or do you respect the hands that came before fully outright? You know?
hmm Yeah, like Kevin, I think that that had come up with us when we were working on the Dawes trees. We were like, well, if it was my tree, I would do this, but because it's their tree, we're
Hmm.
going to take a more conservative approach, both for the health of the tree, we're not there watching it, but conservative in terms of like gradual aesthetic changes or things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And the
Yeah.
thing is too, is over time, like Kelly, you're in a beneficial position because you have someone that does the collection work 24/7 as that's their job primarily at the collection at the Huntington. But
Oh,
Dawes, like Ryan was saying, is it's not the last thing to be taken care of, but it's not the first thing to be taken care of in relation to there isn't just one single person that's full time on it. There is one person that's taking care of it. There's a great person who does wonderful, but at the same time, we are training him as well in certain seasonal productions and things in that way.
Mhm. They did a
so the
really,
honey.
oh,
Oh, sorry. I was
I
just
was just
gonna
gonna,
say.
oh, you go ahead.
It's fine. You go ahead, Ryan.
Okay, I was just gonna say before Kevin, we move off of the Dawes topic, they did do a good job watering and
Hmm.
fertilizing, keeping these trees alive,
Hmm.
but it's just over time there's been that drift of
Well, and
maybe,
they're very receptive too of new information to be able to
yeah,
be given, you know.
yeah, but we all know bonsai can be a major time sink, especially for a large tree. So they weren't like wiring all the branches. They were doing some pruning, but maybe not at the exact time that they should. They might not have known the exact time, or or maybe not to the same level of thoroughness that if it was one person with one tree, you could obviously do. So, what were you gonna
Yeah.
say, Kelly?
Oh, I don't know if you guys heard the news. So Ted is retired from the Huntington, and Daniel
Oh,
Deep
congratulations.
House.
That's huge. Okay. Hmm.
Yep, and
Daniel who?
Daniel Deep House is the assistant curator now.
Okay,
We'll have to get them on sometime, guys.
Daniel or Ted?
Yeah, both.
either.
Yeah, I'm sure they're both game. I haven't asked Daniel, but I talked to Ted. He's game for it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, Kevin, off camera, we were talking about, doing more of these just us kind of discussing
Hmm.
episodes. I think we'll have to be a little bit strategic about it because the fact remains that there's so many people out there that we can interview, so little time. So maybe we can play with the balance, but still a lot of people left to interview for sure.
Mm-mm. And we could do shorter episodes of us in relation of like little quirps and quips as opposed to 1 hour full length of us just shooting the poo.
Yeah. So do we want to move on? Does anyone have a best tree that you dug in 2024? We can put
I
the pictures in the show notes later for the
I
viewers or
I
listeners.
I wish I could have dug trees for the purpose of bonsai. I planted trees for landscaping when I had my business that I just closed down this year or this last year. But being full-time school, running two businesses, dad and a husband, didn't have any available time to dig trees. So I'm out. How about you guys?
Hmm.
I've never dug a tree other
I
What?
than
thought we were
like,
talking about that elm or at some point.
oh yeah. Uh, so I think the timing went off and I just kind of forgot about it. The only
Ah,
trees I've dug were at the Huntington, which I don't really consider that like Yamadori. You're at like a nice
Well,
garden.
that's urban Dory, yeah, I could say.
Yeah, like or just taking out the landscaping.
mhm.
And hopefully this coming year or this year, now that we're in 2025, a friend did invite me to go. So we'll see how that goes. I don't, I think one time will be enough for me.
Well, enjoy it while you're doing it, if that's going to be the only time you're going to do it.
Yeah.
I do think that landscaping counts, It's not the same as Yamadori, obviously,
Yeah.
but you can still get quality trees from it. And a lot of people on the East Coast that, or especially in more suburban heavy places, that is the main place that you can really get a quote unquote wild tree
Right.
that's got some of that pre-built Yamadori foundation for you.
Hmm.
So yeah, it won't be the same, but I would still count it personally.
Mhm.
But
Thank you.
uh, I would say the best tree I dug this year. There's one I think I called it like my king maple. It's actually a Manitoba maple,
Hmm.
and it was a twin trunk. And Manitoba is a species native here in Ohio. Has a couple different common names. The Latin name is Acer negundo, and the other common name, it's the one that's like compound 3 to 5 leaves. Do you know that one, Kevin? Trying to
Not
think
off the top of my head.
what the other common names are. Um,
Let's find out. Google away.
like something with a B. Elder, box elder maper. Yeah,
Box
yeah.
elder maple. Hmm.
Yep. That's the
Ash leaf
other.
maple and maple ash.
Yeah. So I dug my king box elder Manitoba maple, whatever you want to call it. And it's twin trunk. It's in a 10-gallon pot. Used 10 gallons of soil on it. And
Wow.
it has survived the collection. It threw out new shoots everywhere. So I'm very optimistic for that one next year. It has this nice giant hollow below the two trunks where the two trunks start. So I think that that one will be interesting going forward. I also kind of dug in the fall, uh, we could call it a king yew. It's the largest yew I've ever dug. It's probably more like 15 gallons of soil.
Hmm.
Once I potted it, I don't think I'm going to be able to move it again until it's fully recovered and ready for the next repotting.
Have
And
you
that one,
considered putting your
yeah,
heavy ones on a kind of movable cart and just keeping them there so you can move it around as opposed to putting it on the ground?
I do not. The maple I can move. The yew is the only one I don't think I'll be able to move. I'm hoping once it recovers, if it recovers, it's still green for now, which is surprising because it was a really poor spot to dig. It was right next to the eaves of a house.
Hmm.
So all of the roots ran straight into the lawn. There wasn't really that many fine roots around because it was kind of not getting water, and we had that big drought this summer before I dug it. Um, so not a lot of fine roots, so I was surprised that it's still green. There was one ground layered root that I saved and had fine roots on it. So I wrapped that up and potted that separately from all the deeper roots that I'm not sure if they will bud out or not. Um,
These are pretty durable. They do pretty well.
Yeah, this was my first year really digging U's. I had said before that I always wanted to dig a U, and then this year it was raining U's. So I did my first couple in February, although I did not was not as experienced as I am now, so none of those first ones did it, but those were now or never digs. And then
Hmm.
I had some like actually June of last year that survived, and I started styling on them this year. So you're right that they have seemed to be pretty resilient.
Hmm.
So I'm optimistic, but we'll see. But my hope for that one is that if it buds back enough that I can prune it smaller, and then maybe eventually it will be more movable size. I'm not really sure what the future holds for that one, but
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah. So those are a couple of things I've been digging.
Nice.
Mhm.
Most progressed tree. Let's say all my trees have progressed equally in relation to, as I said earlier, being so busy. I was able to manage to find time, like I said, with workshops with Hugo Zamora, going just working on my own stuff, having my daughter help me with certain things, meaning helping wise, just her playing with the soil while I'm wiring or styling or trimming a tree. And then she
It's
picks up the garbage.
it's
So
a start.
it is. And they're healthy, they're growing. My rock plantings took off like crazy this year, which is great. I did quite a few rock
Yeah,
plantings.
you made those from scratch, right?
Yeah, they took hours. Like the last one I did, I think I went to bed at 6 in the morning. Um, it was good though. It was good. It was
Mm.
like right before finals week.
Yeah, they turned out well.
Yeah, they're going pretty good. Yeah. Oh, I guess one of my big accomplishments was tree-wise was I styled what I would call a friend and a client, Chris Mead, his tree, his big um uh mugo pine,
Mm.
Telperion mugo, and it won best tree conifer and the ABS award at our local show this 2024 bonsai show. If you look at the picture, it needs to be filled in more, but the nice thing about a local show is that you can get your bearings about it, and that was a wonderful time for him because that was his first ever tree he showed in a show. So
Which is
very
surprising
very proud
for
of him.
how many years he's been doing bonsai.
I would say unsurprising for a lot of people. My personal opinion is that a lot of people are into bonsai just to be into it, and there's a big step forward if you choose to look at your work publicly and put it in that eye for people to judge. Like Michael Hagedorn said on the episode we did years back, where he said, if you're going to put your work in public, you can't worry about what people are going to say about it because once it's out there, it's out there. You know, they're going to say what they're going to say regardless. You have to just stick to your guns. But I think with people showing in our local club, and Kelly, maybe your thoughts too in your clubs, I think it helps them establish that they are a part of the bonsai scene and also their work helps people connect with certain thing that they're projecting or the public likes their work as well. You know, everyone's always their own worst critic. So
You're actually a really good artist, Kevin. I never saw any of your work until last year. I think you posted something. I was like, he did that? I mean, I didn't know. I just never asked to see any of you guys' work.
Mm.
I will say this last year and the year before that have quite a progression for me in relation to having taken it more seriously in the relation of putting my time in and working with the time I have available and just putting out work that I want to see better. So yeah, I'll say that. Thank you. That's a big compliment. I appreciate
Yeah, it was impressive.
that.
Mm. Were you involved in the bonsai shows in LA area at all, Kelly?
Uh, yeah, so we have several clubs. Some clubs you have to like get through somebody to be approved to put your tree in,
Oh,
which
cool.
I understand there should be some standards.
It's like Fight Club. We don't talk about Fight Club.
And then others where they're like, just bring something. I'm like, you need to see it. They're like, no, we're fine. Like, just bring
Yeah.
something.
That's
And
yeah.
so I'm allowed to be in the ones where you just bring something and no one has to pre-approve it. Um,
Ooh, VIP.
and it's, I mean, like now that I know like better, like my trees are definitely not um like exhibit worthy, but
Mm,
in a small club where they're just okay with people showing, which I think is a good experience if you get the opportunity to do it, just do it.
Mm,
Because the general public that comes through, they don't know. They just think everything looks great.
mm,
Um, I mean, obviously if you're a bonsai person, you'll be like, what is that doing in the show? But it's okay. And I've had like I think it was this year, Adam Toth and maybe
mm.
even Kaya. They were at one of the shows where I had a little tree. Someone they let me show it, and I go just be brutally honest. Like I'm not gonna get my feelings hurt or offended.
Hmm.
Um, and they told me what needed to be done. I kind of knew it too, so I'm like, okay, because it validates what I was thinking too. But I think it is a good experience to show because then you have to like get your table or borrow someone's table and
mm,
make your little kusamono or borrow someone's kusamono.
Mm.
Um, yeah, it's a whole, the whole thing about display. And then sometimes we're lucky, Shaheen, who I think you guys should meet, he's really cool. He's a photographer by trade. So he's
Ooh.
in our club and he's really good, or getting really good at bonsai. And he'll take like professional pictures of our tree with the background, the lighting,
Oh,
everything. And then he just
nice.
volunteers to do that for us. So it's kind of nice to have that as a little memory.
Mm, mm.
Um,
Are those trees that he photographs, are they on the club website somewhere?
Uh, I saw an email recently that it will be posted on the website. So our clubs aren't great at keeping up with like like some of the websites. I'm like, wow, that was from
Mm.
5, 6, 7, 8 years ago. No updates. Just because again, this is all voluntary,
Yeah.
and we don't always have like a webmaster that has time to do that for us.
Mm.
So we just basically rely on emails to send things. But I think it will be updated on the website. If it does, I can maybe mention it if I remember.
Yeah, or send it to us and we can add it to the show notes later or the social media, anything like that.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm all over the place because this whole week has been crazy in LA with the smoke and everything. Like
Yeah.
my
Yeah,
eyes are like not feeling good. I feel like I just want to sleep the whole like all day long. Um,
100%. Yeah.
it's
What
hard to
part of
be outside.
LA are you in? I'm gonna look up the map
I'm
right now.
I'm near East LA, so I'm not in any of like the danger zones, although it just felt like the whole place was just going to burn.
Oh,
Like who
yeah.
knows where
Mm,
random
mm.
fires are going to start. And there was one that started nearby, but there's a fire training school here, so that got put out really quick
Oh, that's
Good.
good.
by the
Good.
academy. Um, but I'm like in the triangle, like in the middle of the triangle of where all the fires are, so all the smoke is gathering
Uh,
here.
Oh
Today's not
man.
bad. The sky looks
yeah.
blue finally. Um, but I mean, like one of my one I don't know if you guys know Steve. I think you met him before. Steve, Sierra Madre
Yeah.
Bonsai.
Oh,
Hmm,
yeah.
He
hmm,
had
hmm.
yeah, he had to evacuate. Luckily nothing happened to his house or his trees. I
Yeah, I
think he's
saw him
working on
watering on his
yeah.
he filmed himself watering it. So I was like,
Mm.
that's yeah. It was a good update because I was gonna message him and I know I heard and I know now that the one of the people who does bonsai auctions, his house burned down. There's a GoFundMe out right now
Oh,
for him.
Nathan.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. He's pretty nice. Um yeah, so just weird here. So my mind is all over the place. I don't know why I
Oh,
can't think. It's just been hard to sleep lately.
you've been in
Yeah.
a horrible situation. Like it's affecting everybody around there. So no worry. Yeah, you're all good. You're making complete sense. So you're finishing your sentences. So it's good.
Good. I'm trying.
Yeah. Stay safe in LA.
Yeah, all people, please. Yeah.
Yeah, turn on all your air purifiers and try not to
Mm.
be outdoors.
I know for the Oregon fires that they are yearly now, sadly.
Mm.
Um, and into Washington, I know people have taken box fans, like the ones you buy at the store that are shaped like a box, a square, and they'll buy air filters for a furnace and they'll put them on the side that blows out. So um, it's blowing clean air into the house. And those from pictures I saw from people I know personally, they turned black from the pollution from the wildfire smoke in like a couple of days. So
Yeah.
they had to redo
Wow.
them. So they actually ran out of furnace filters at some places because the people were,
Mm.
I mean, you need to breathe clean air. That stuff's bad.
You
Yeah.
know what's interesting? So a new friend of mine, she lives in South Pasadena, and I
Mm.
was just looking for bottled water just because I ran out, and I was like, well, let me go find some, and like several places were sold out. So I went. I'm like, that Trader Joe's will have something. So I went, and I was like, why is it so dark? And I forgot she told me 2 days ago it was power completely off.
Mm.
I
Oh,
was
wow.
driving, and I was like, pretty sure the Trader Joe's is going to be closed if the whole entire neighborhood is blacked out.
Mm,
And
mm.
they were the only light in the whole neighborhood. So they must
That's,
have had generators running. Um, but yeah, walking in was no problem. Walking back out of Trader Joe's, the air, it was just like smelled really bad. Plus then
mm.
it just started burning my eyes. I was like, I don't know how people can stay home with this going on.
Wow, that's
But
intense. Like, ugh.
looking like things are getting contained.
Mm. Was it a couple years? Was it 2 years ago? Yeah, 2 years ago. The big forest fire in Canada, all that smoke came down to Ohio and people had no
Oh,
idea what
yeah.
was going on. They're like, oh my God, I'm like, and I was in the middle of working outside in it and I was like,
Mm.
oh, black boogers and stuff and just coughing up black stuff. But like,
Was it
I had to
snowing
tell,
ash?
no, not that bad, but it was very thick. The air quality advisory was like in the red.
Yeah.
And like there were days I couldn't go work outside because it was just, it was so bad. And some days I'd wear a mask and stuff. And or it just made me think about Oregon. Like, the last few years I had lived there before moving to Ohio, it was always Oh, yeah, the fire's here, the smoke's here, stay inside, don't go out. Just, yeah, it's pretty crazy how it's just a common theme now. I mean, Ryan, you dealt with that too when you were in Washington, but
Yeah, I did experience it in Washington, like certain, around August, September, if you try to make a road trip to national parks, you'd have to plan around where the fires are. And
yeah.
a lot of the time certain roads would be closed or the whole park would be closed. So you'd have to look into that. But I think it was the year after I moved here that they had a really bad fire year. And
Mhm.
I saw people's pictures online. It was like orange skies everywhere and
Yeah.
like those Blade Runner scenes. I've
Like you're in
seen
hell.
yeah, I've seen those pictures propping up both in LA right now, in San Francisco, probably that same year where it happened in Seattle with all the Canadian wildfire smoke.
Mm.
And then I think last summer, 2 summers ago, the one you're talking about, Kevin, they had those same really orange sky pictures in New York City. So it
Yeah.
seems like almost wherever you are, you cannot avoid the wildfire smoke probably getting blown to you at some point.
You know what's interesting to take it back to bonsai is that the trees will interact with that in a relation of stress intolerance, where they may drop a lot of leaves or they may just stop and put themselves in a hibernation, so to speak, or a dormancy period because it's such a high stress involvement where all the smoke comes in, you're feeling the heat from the smoke being insulating the heat, and it's not having that release into the atmosphere, right? So your trees are going to have a different evolution in that time period. Ryan Neal talked about it, I think, and other people in Oregon when that really bad one happened in 2021, where they hit like the 119 or whatever. And there was the smoke, and then there was the heat damage and everything else. Like I noticed with mine, my tropicals did great. My conifers did fine. My maples didn't do so well after the smoke had lifted because they started burning the leaves. Even though I was watering consistently and everything else, it was just that heat stress. Then when I moved them into the shade, they rebounced back. But
Mm.
that's one thing to think about, Kelly, too, in relation of your trees. You're getting all the smoke. It's going to be a kind of a
Kind of
it's going to
training.
insulate. Yeah, it's going to insulate.
Well, it blocks the light too, so you might get the trees growing the leaves as though they're in the shade. And
Yeah.
then when all of a sudden the smoke clears, then they might get the sun damage just for the leaves not being acclimatized to as much sun as they're suddenly getting.
Oh, and also
Yeah,
a higher rate of humidity too because it's insulated. So that's going to be completely different too.
yeah. You know what? I saw some posts and pictures of like neighborhoods that were flattened by the fire, so
Hmm.
houses and structures gone, but trees were standing, and some of them still had their green leaves.
Hmm.
So a coworker was like, "How is that possible?" I'm like, "I don't know. I mean, there's moisture in the tree." She's like, "But the leaves are still green. Everything else is flattened. Cars melted, all that stuff. So how are the trees still standing and with green leaves?"
It's a
Right.
good question. It probably depends on the type of tree. I know, different species have adaptation for forest fire. Like the pitch pine, the cone only opens in response to fire. So
Yep.
Hmm.
last fall, I collected some pitch pine cones, and then I put the bag on top of my fireplace to open the cones and collect the seeds.
Huh.
And then other species, they've got different bark adaptations to try to make them resistant to these types of fires. So it probably depends, maybe if the tree has a lot of water in it, like you're saying, Kelly, or if the fire was moving very quickly, then the tree might be able to withstand it, something like that. So,
Well, something to think about too, not to keep going on about the California thing, but there is a lot of eucalyptus trees that were brought over by early settlers and pioneers.
Hmm.
And if you look at the fire that happened in Australia, as we talked to Hugh Grant, right, Ryan? And he's
mm,
like, oh, so many eucalyptus. And I think we maybe touched on the fire a little bit, but those have such heavy oils in their makeup inside their physiology and the makeup of the tree that they just incinerate themselves like they're just like throwing a match into a tinder box and it just catches fire. And even when they fall down, they do off gassing where those can emit a vapor that catches on fire as well. And so
mm,
there's that invasive versus non-invasive aspect where those trees have become now naturalized in the sense of still being not native, but invasively naturalized, I guess you could call it. I don't want to get in that political climate of that, but there's also that aspect where it's fueling a lot of the fire there in LA right now because of the fact that those are so prevalent. But also something to think about too for anybody listening and us talking. Forest fires are a natural entity, but the issue we're running
Mhm.
into now is the drought that's not as natural because forest fires were done to help bring in new plantings and regenerate environments and soil conditions and everything else. But with things happening, political ideas or other things, it's just not a common theme anymore, or prescribed burn in certain ways aren't being done as they should be either, in my opinion, of course. But yeah, those are the things fueling a lot of the LA stuff is with, like you're saying, there are things in plants that help keep their leaves like sequoia. The huge sequoias that were burning, they're still alive, but they have charred remains and maybe half burned out. But it's just that depending on the water mobility and how quickly they're moving water or what they're doing to shut down. The palm trees were the biggest thing I saw too that were catching fire and just like
Mm.
it was like an ember just to the whole tree. It was pretty crazy. I'd never seen that before.
Yeah, the one main takeaway from this whole thing that's happening in LA right now is because I was thinking I better just pack a little bag. And what
Mm-hmm.
really matters to me. So I looked around and I was like, I only care about the old photos that I have because they're not virtualized yet.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe some jewelry that my I've gotten from my aunts or mom. Um, and this like a change of clothes because if my bosses had to evacuate, luckily their place is still standing, but all they could get was just like a change of clothes, and then they were staying living in a hotel that they also had to evacuate and find another hotel. So
Jeez,
I'm just thinking,
please.
oh, I would like a change of clothes. Yeah, you can go to the store and buy something, but it's just easier if you just have a change of clothes.
Mm.
Yeah,
So, but
yeah.
really, it was just my photos. I'm like, everything else could burn and disappear. If I have my photos, I'm okay. You can start over.
Would you try to take any trees with you or any single tree?
I thought about that. So none of my trees are like fantastic enough that I'm like, I
Mm.
can't lose these. Um, the only thing I thought in terms of bonsai wise to take was a pot, and it's not like a super expensive pot or anything super
Mm-hmm.
special, except it's sentimental to me.
Mm-hmm.
That would have probably been the only one thing I would have taken besides my photos and jewelry.
And your bonsai tools.
I thought about that too, but you could have, you know,
Mm.
replaced those
Oh,
easily.
True.
yeah, yeah. If you got insurance, then I guess that's replaceable. Mm.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's a
You can only take
whole.
so much.
It's interesting
Mm.
how this conversation evolves into a whole spectrum of things with fire relation to natural environments to the idea of what matters, in
It's kind of
relation
like
to if,
a climate trauma dumping. Like you can't really avoid it. It's the elephant in the room. And
yeah,
especially if you're in LA, like everybody's gonna see that every day. You have to think about these things. So probably good
yeah,
that you've got your plan, Kelly.
bonsai therapy
Mm.
time
Yeah.
podcast.
I mean, there was one, I mean, at least I thought I'd take at least one bonsai thing. That's just the one
Right.
pot.
Mm.
No, for sure. Is Mel okay? Is everyone okay
Oh
that
yeah,
you
they're down way down south, so I don't
Bob Pressler, his new place is okay?
I think he's too far north to,
Okay.
or not too far, but he's north of everything. Because I was looking at the map of where everything was. I'm like, okay. So most of the bonsai people here, minus Steve, who evacuated, but I think he's back at his house. I don't think anyone's really lost anything except, obviously we saw Nathan Simmons,
Right.
I think his last name is.
Mm.
He lost his house.
Hmm. Yeah, I did see that. Yeah. Yeah, that's intense. Anybody who's in California, well, I'm praying for y'all every day. Just so you know, let us know if we can help in any way, or just share the word if there's any groups to donate to or anything else that way. We'll definitely do.
Yeah, we can post. I saw a GoFundMe for the Nathan Simmons.
Nathan's, yep.
Yeah, we can post that in the show notes by the time we get this out. And if
Yeah,
there's anything else, maybe some resources like charities or things like that we can find.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, so kind of back on the topic of displays for that we did last year. Um, I think it was the first year I moved to Columbus, I did a forest fire display because that was the year that there was the forest fire in Washington that was really bad.
Hmm.
And I had this Yamadori from Washington State that was from a forest fire area. that at the time it didn't survive collection. So I maybe you remember this one, Kevin. I charred the tree. I planted it in just pure pumice to have that kind of ashy look and contrast. And I had it in a kintsugi pot that had I guess the pot broke when I brought it here on my long drive.
Hmm.
And I kintsugi'd it a silver color also to kind of go with that ashy theme.
Hmm.
And then I had I think it was an oil rig as the accent. So I've
Trying
been,
to remember that one. It sounds familiar, but I can't remember fully.
yeah, yeah, I've been doing a lot of environmental themed displays. And this year was no different. This year mine was uh, boxwood, kind of one that I've fully collected and styled here in Ohio in the last 3 years. And it's got a carved dead top, kind of like a styled like a deciduous, just with that dead top. Um, in the the pot was from Pot Punching Potters. It was kind of like a almost like wood grain look to it, but a little darker.
Hmm.
I'll post a picture, but the overall theme this year was to prompt the viewer to ask, what would you do for the earth? And so I was thinking for a while about doing a display focused on litter because I live close to campus, I live close to downtown, like somewhere in between there. And every time you go out for a walk, every time I walk my dog, there's always some litter around. And so I, out of curiosity, looked up how many pieces of litter there are in the US. And then I looked up how many people there are in the US.
Hmm.
And the the number of litter pieces in the US is projected just to keep increasing every year. They do track or estimate somehow. But at the time that I searched it, if I did the math correctly, it was if everybody picked up 3 pieces of litter per day for every day, then we would no longer have any litter. But I think most people just leave it there, kind of get that apathy, like, oh, that's gross, you know?
Hmm.
So what I did for this display to kind of bring these pieces together was I did go around the neighborhood and collect litter, and then I dumped it around the base of the tree to kind of make it like it was suffocating the tree in a way. And I had that poster board um, that I laid flat on the table, and I put the tree and the litter on top of that. And then I wrote on the poster board, what would you do for the earth? And I had a little cup with some markers for people to write their ideas. So this was kind of an experimental display that I did this year to try to get people to provide the ideas for what they would want to do for the earth. And then hopefully psychologically, if they come up with the idea, then they may be more willing to actually follow through with it. I have no idea if I can ever track that this kind of thing has any impact on people's thinking, but that's what I did for my display at the show this year. I just had that one display.
I wish that display was more out in the open. It was a little closed off. And where it was
It
at.
was not next, like it was not in the area of most of the display trees.
Yeah.
It was kind of off to the side.
Yeah.
It was
I
next
think
to
feel like it
the,
got lost in the mix a little bit.
yeah, I was having a hard time because I wanted to put it somewhere where both people could see it and write their ideas, but I also didn't want to offend anybody by this very non-traditional display, maybe being next to the wrong person's tree. And I didn't necessarily want to clog up the pathways of the actual viewing area if people were
Hmm.
riding and things like that. So that's why I put it off to the side, and I guess I was a little worried about the perception, especially for that person who was next to me. So I I made sure to ask Chris and give him a heads up as to what the display was going to be and that it was going to be a little bit trashy this year, literally.
No, no
So,
pun intended, right?
yeah, yeah.
Pun intended. Yeah.
Mhm. So yeah, I think it turned out well.
I would like to see more displays in the future regarding human impact on environment or ways that makes people think about their own impact in their daily lives. Or, I've thought about doing a wildfire one for a while, but more implicit to like using things that are used by firefighters as a display piece. Instead of a scroll, have something, instead of a companion planting, have something else of like their gear maybe, or something physical as opposed to a plant, accentuating with this bonsai tree in relation of man with tree, fire correspondence of what man did or did not do, or nature involved with man's help decreasing the fire, something that way.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea because you don't often think about I mean, we know there are firefighters out there, but
Yeah.
unless you're there or really following up on the news, you don't really know the specifics of what are they doing to actually fight the fires and what do they go through and all of that. So yeah, it's an interesting way to tell more stories through bonsai. Um, as far as I see, I think my last couple of years of exploring that human impact is really just scratching the surface because nowadays there's many more ways that humans are interacting with nature
Mm.
than ever before. And a lot of the traditional bonsai displays almost pretends like that doesn't happen. And maybe there's a mudman or an ancient temple, little pagoda
Yeah, right.
in the figurine, or it's just some natural accent, naturalistic tree, or even like stylized Japanese tree with a natural setting as the scroll. So it's almost pretending like fully nature, no influence of humankind in there.
Mm.
Uh, so I guess those are like two opposite spectrums in the bonsai display world.
Yeah.
We'll be back at some point with part 2 for 2025.
The Bonsai Time podcast is purely grown and horticulturally crafted by Kevin Ferris, Ryan Houston, and Kelly Louie. To find out more and see pictures about today's interview or sponsors, see the show notes linked in the description. Submit questions, suggestions, or tree pictures for future discussion episodes. Find the contact form on our website, bonsaitimepodcast.com, or message us directly at bonsaitimepodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support future episodes, please rate us, share episodes, donate, or become a sponsor. The music on today's episode was provided by MIDI Cancer. To find more of their work, check out their SoundCloud and Bandcamp pages. To stay in touch with us, subscribe to the Bonsai Time podcast on your favorite podcast app, Instagram, or YouTube, and Facebook. Contact us individually. Kevin's Instagram is Kevin_Ferris PNW. Kelly's Instagram is Bonsai with Kelly. Ryan's website is invivobonsai.com, and his Instagram is invivobonsai. Thank you all, and remember, bonsai on!